Mexico chooses silence, while Canada responds forcefully. Which strategy is the key to success when confronting Trump in this trade war? Canada, under the leadership of the new Prime Minister Mark Carney, has officially taken a hardline stance against U.S. tariffs after Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from Canada. Ontario immediately retaliated by raising tariffs on electricity exports to the U.S.
President Trump's trade war is heating up. The Canadian province of Ontario says it will slap a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S. Let's go to CBS News correspondent Chanel Call. Chanel, great to see you.
This put pressure on important states like New York, Michigan, and Minnesota, forcing Trump to respond. Mark Carney, who is expected to bring a new wave for Canada, declared that the country could no longer trust the U.S. and must protect itself.
We will never, ever bow down to a bully. Canadians will always stick together. And we won't stand by as tariffs hurt our workers and their families.
And it's not just Carney. Ontario Premier Doug Ford is also unafraid to confront Trump. This situation shows a shift in Canada's approach. They are no longer a silent ally, but a powerful partner capable of ramping up retaliation strategies when necessary. The 25% tariff that Ontario imposed on electricity exports to the U.S. could cost the U.S. economy billions of dollars. Specifically, New York State relies heavily on electricity from Canada, according to data from the U.S. Department of Commerce. The steel and aluminum tariffs reduced Canada's exports to the U.S. by $4.6 billion in 2018. Canada and Mexico are showing two very different strategies in response. Mexico, under the leadership of President López Obrador, maintains a discreet diplomatic strategy. Instead of confronting directly, Mexico has chosen to negotiate, yield, and remain silent to minimize conflict. Specifically, Mexico does not react as strongly as Canada, but instead opts for secret negotiations and one-on-one agreements with the U.S. In contrast, Canada has decided not to remain silent and to take bold action from the start. Mark Carney believes that the silence strategy towards Trump is not the solution. His prominent statement resonated strongly in the international community. If we stay silent, Trump will continue to disrespect us. That's why Canada chose to confront publicly, retaliate, and demand respect from the U.S. Although Mexico maintained a silent approach, data from the World Trade Organization, WTO, shows that Mexico still maintained a stable trade relationship with the U.S. through discreet negotiations. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, played an extremely important role in dealing with the U.S. when Trump raised tariffs on steel and aluminum. Doug Ford didn't hesitate to increase electricity tariffs for U.S. states, particularly New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. This was a strategic move to make the U.S. reconsider its decision. Is that this move made Trump rethink. U.S. trade representatives had to meet with the Ontario government for negotiations. This was a clear shift in how Trump treated Canada compared to Mexico. This proves that Canada's tough strategy was not in vain. Canada, under the leadership of Mark Carney and Doug Ford, has sent a clear message. If you want to respect us, we will fight for that. This trade war will continue, but Canada and Mexico could gain the upper hand if they continue to apply smart and bold strategies. Trump will find it difficult to maintain his bullying strategy in a globalized world, where countries can come together to counter unfair policies. Stay tuned, because the upcoming developments will leave you shocked. Lately, Donald Trump has looked exhausted. The U.S. economy is on the brink. GDP could drop between negative 2.8% and negative 3% in the first quarter. The stock market is plummeting and top CEOs are losing confidence. Yet, instead of tackling these crises, Trump is spending his time on social media, ranting about completely unrelated issues. Something is definitely not right. Conservative media is turning on Trump. For years, Trump had the full support of conservative media. But now, even the Wall Street Journal, a longtime ally, is calling his trade war the most foolish in history. And they're not alone. Chief Executive Magazine reports that CEO confidence in America is at its lowest since 2012. A survey of 220 top executives shows growing fear about economic instability, many calling Trump's tariff policies a disaster.
You know what? You want to know something? You want to know something? We always win. We always win.
But the reality? Trump's top economic advisors are being bombarded with calls from major business leaders begging for action before a full-blown recession takes hold. And trust me, what's coming next will shock you. Trump is glued to social media, not fixing the economy. With the economy in freefall, what's Trump doing? Spending hours on Truth Social, posting about Elon Musk? Instead of rolling out a plan to stabilize the economy, Trump is fixated on praising billionaires and picking fights online. Meanwhile, a recent poll from Michigan, a critical battleground state, shows 70% of voters disapprove of his leadership. A former White House advisor confirmed, "We thought he'd focus on inflation, taxes, and job growth. Instead, he's on social media all day." Trump's priorities? Completely out of sync with what Americans actually need. Social Security at risk? While everyday Americans struggle with rising costs, Trump is considering cutting Social Security call centers, a move that would make it harder for seniors to access their benefits. We have to look at cutting some of these bloated programs. A report from the Social Security Administration warns that privatizing Social Security could lead to skyrocketing healthcare costs, while reducing the effectiveness of these programs. So, who benefits? You guessed it, big corporations. If Trump hands control of Social Security to Wall Street, it's game over for millions of seniors. Trump declares war on paper straws. As the U.S. economy spirals, Trump is laser-focused on plastic straws. The Justice Department is now backing his push to ban paper straws, claiming they're expensive, ineffective, and bad for consumers.
We're going back to plastic straws. I think it's okay.
Critics say this is just a distraction tactic, keeping people fixated on nonsense instead of the real issues: skyrocketing inflation, job losses, and failing economic policies. Is this really the best use of a president's time? The Guantanamo immigration nightmare. In a shocking move, Trump ordered that undocumented immigrants with no criminal record be sent to Guantanamo Bay. His reasoning? Protect national security. We're keeping the worst criminals away from our cities. But here's the catch. A Fox News report revealed that none of the 290 detainees were criminals, and just weeks later, they were quietly released back into the U.S. A total PR disaster. Experts call this another case of Trump playing politics on immigration, while offering zero real solutions. Trump's allies defend economic collapse. Even as the U.S. economy crumbles, some of Trump's closest allies are still standing by his policies. No pain, no gain. Tariffs make America strong. But data from the Federal Reserve tells a different story. The U.S. economy is facing a -3% GDP decline, the worst in years. Yet, Trump's officials continue to insist, we are having the best economy ever. Believe me, the truth. Since Trump took office, the stock market has fallen harder than other major economies, showing that his trade policies are hurting, not helping. And the worst part? This is just the beginning. Stay tuned. The next developments will leave you stunned. The U.S. has just imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian goods, with a shocking condition for removal. Canada must become the 51st state. This unprecedented policy has sparked outrage across economic, political, and business circles. A top economist has taken to the airwaves to slam the move, questioning whether it is a strategic play or a catastrophic gamble. On March 10, 2025, the U.S. administration announced a 50% tariff on all Canadian imports. While America has used tariffs as a trade weapon before, this is the first time such an extreme condition has been tied to a tariff rollback. Canada must become part of the U.S. The U.S. and Canada are deeply intertwined economic partners. Total trade between the two nations hit $793 billion in 2023. Canada is America's top trade partner, making up 14% of U.S. global trade. 75% of Canada's exports flow directly to the U.S., making it highly dependent on American markets. If the 50% tariff holds, both economies will face serious damage. Oil and gas industry. Canada provides 50% of U.S. crude oil imports. A tariff hike could skyrocket oil prices, raising manufacturing and transportation costs. Aluminum and lumber. Canada supplies 59% of U.S. aluminum and 26% of construction lumber. Expect higher costs for cars, homes, and consumer goods. Inflation. Experts predict this policy could drive U.S. inflation up 1.8% within 6 months, worsening America's ongoing economic struggles. Stay tuned. Expert reactions and business fallout are just beginning to unfold. Immediately after the announcement, CNBC's chief economist, Steve Leisman, blasted the policy on live TV. He called it insanity, arguing that the U.S. lacks a clear strategy and is instead destroying market confidence while harming its own economy. The financial markets plunged in response. S&P 500 fell 2.1% in just 24 hours. The Canadian dollar lost 4.3% of its value, increasing import costs for Canadians. Stocks of FedEx, General Motors, and Boeing dropped between 3 to 5%, signaling concerns in supply chains and global commerce. Major corporations are sounding the alarm. Apple and Tesla warned that tariffs on Canadian components would disrupt supply chains, slowing production and raising consumer prices. Ford and General Motors rely heavily on Canadian auto parts. If tariffs persist, new car prices could jump by $2,500 to $4,000. Did the U.S. government really think this through? Keep watching. Things are about to get even more explosive. Canada didn't hold back. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau immediately rejected the U.S. demand, stating, "Canada is not for sale. Our sovereignty is non-negotiable." Ontario Premier Doug Ford added, "American businesses fear this policy, but they're too scared to speak out. Canada is ready to strike back. Canada is preparing retaliatory tariffs against U.S. agriculture, steel, and tech products. This could send food prices in the U.S. soaring by 8 to 12%, directly impacting millions of American families." Is this a win for America? Or a massive economic self-inflicted wound? Even within America, backlash is erupting. Republican leaders are deeply concerned, warning that damaging ties with Canada could destabilize key U.S. industries and weaken international alliances. Corporate America is also pushing back. Amazon, Walmart, and Tesla argue that tariffs will increase costs for U.S. consumers and hurt spending power. Financial analyst Jim Cramer warned, a trade war with Canada could trigger a recession in the U.S. Manufacturers are considering moving production out of the U.S., leading to massive job losses. So is the U.S. truly gaining from this, or is this the start of an economic disaster? This radical trade policy has already shaken markets, alarmed businesses, and outraged America's closest ally. The economic consequences could be devastating for both nations. The big question remains, will the U.S. back down, or is this just the beginning of a new economic war? Stay tuned. This story is far from over. Why does Fox News still continue to applaud Trump as the U.S. economy free falls and allies turn away? Could the truth be getting hid from the public? Under Trump's leadership, the U.S. economy faced its fair share of storms. Despite Trump constantly claiming to be a business expert, the tariff policies and trade wars he initiated led the U.S. economy into recession. In 2020, the U.S. stock market saw its largest value drop since 2008. With the S&P 500 losing nearly 34% of its value in the first quarter of the pandemic. According to a study from Harvard University, Trump's tariff policies cost American consumers an additional $7.8 billion in 2019, driving inflation and reducing purchasing power. While unemployment dropped in the first few years, by 2020, the unemployment rate exploded due to the pandemic, hitting a record high of 14.8%. Meanwhile, Fox News continues to air programs supporting Trump, even claiming tariffs don't cause inflation, and the economy isn't as bad as the media says. However, the real numbers are proving the opposite. Fox News has chosen to stand by Trump, despite the truth becoming more and more obvious.
That this was always part of the plan, that the president's tool basket and his tools in that tool basket of how to truly bring our economy back after the malaise of the Biden years, but it's going to be a little bit bumpy. It will be imperfect. I mean, if it was easy and you could do it overnight, then it would happen with a snap of a fingers, but that's not it. And I think what's really telling.
One area where Fox News shows great creativity in crafting narratives is the relationship between the U.S. and its allied countries, especially Canada. Despite Trump's repeated strong statements about Canada, even declaring he would impose high tariffs on the country's goods, Fox News deliberately twists the truth. They often make unfounded claims, saying Canada fears Trump and had to concede to U.S. demands. In reality, Canada isn't the only country affected by Trump's policies. they strongly resisted the tariffs. And this even led to more tense negotiations between the two sides. However, Fox News consistently tries to deny that the US put undue pressure on Canada. This not only reflects bias in reporting, but also demonstrates a clear media campaign by Fox News to protect Trump by distorting the truth. One of the most concerning things about how Fox News defends Trump is their acceptance of the authoritarian policies he has implemented. Fox News and their commentators, like Laura Ingraham, have even stated that the Constitution doesn't need to protect non-citizens, which directly contradicts the fundamental principles of freedom and human rights. In the end, although Fox News has tried to control public opinion and protect Trump throughout, the truth is, these efforts are gradually failing. The public is becoming more aware of the bias in the media. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube have also helped spread the truth about Trump's mistakes and failures, making Fox News media campaign less and less effective. In reality, in a society where information is more accessible than ever, controlling public opinion through the media is harder than ever before. While Fox News continues to try to maintain public support for Trump, the real issues with the economy and politics have started to awaken the audience. We're living in an era where information is a weapon. Those in power and media organizations can easily create an alternate reality to protect their interests. However, the truth will always find a way to shine through. While Fox News may try to continue shielding Trump, the U.S. economy, the anger of allies, and the failure in policies will be undeniable factors. Don't go anywhere. What's about to happen will leave you glued to the screen and will definitely make you rethink everything. USA-Canada tensions. Who will take the hit? The U.S. raises tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%. Canada strikes back immediately, cutting electricity, imposing road tolls, and halting U.S. imports. Tensions between the two nations have never been higher. Is this the beginning of an unprecedented economic war? Trump unexpectedly raises tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. The U.S. government announced an immediate tariff increase on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. The reason? Ontario imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., affecting 1.5 million households in New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. Trump's response was swift and aggressive. Canada is taxing our electricity? We'll hit back even harder. The U.S. also issued a warning. If Canada does not remove trade barriers, tariffs on Canadian car imports could rise in April, a devastating blow to Canada's auto industry. But the biggest surprise didn't come from the US. It came from Canada's fierce retaliation. Canada hits back immediately. Canada refuses to back down. Instead, it fights back harder than ever. Ontario threatens to cut electricity exports to the US entirely if tariff policies are not reversed. British Columbia, BC, immediately enforces new measures, imposing tolls and fees on U.S. trucks passing through BC to Alaska, tightening import regulations on fuel, food, and consumer goods from the U.S., halting purchases of alcohol and agricultural products from certain U.S. states. Other provinces respond with tough countermeasures. Nova Scotia bans U.S. businesses from bidding on government contracts. Alberta warns of further retaliatory measures within 24 hours. Manitoba and Newfoundland remove all U.S. goods from state-run retail stores. What are the consequences of these moves? U.S. freight companies dependent on Alaska routes face severe disruptions. U.S. goods struggle to penetrate the Canadian market. American businesses in Canada start reconsidering operations and adjusting strategies. Canada isn't just retaliating, it's accelerating its plan to break free from U.S. economic dependence. The Canadian government is swiftly expanding trade negotiations with Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The goal? To boost exports to new markets and reduce reliance on the U.S. as quickly as possible. But did Washington truly anticipate this level of trade war escalation? Economic fallout, U.S. stock market plunges, recession fears grow. The U.S.-Canada trade war isn't just political drama, it's already causing real economic damage. Stock markets tumble, S&P 500 drops 0.8% within hours of Trump's announcement. Major steel, aluminum, and auto manufacturers see sharp declines in stock prices. Steel and aluminum prices surge. U.S. manufacturers struggle with rising costs, affecting automobiles, construction, and consumer goods. The auto industry takes a major hit. Leading automakers like Ford, GM, and Tesla scramble to adjust supply chains. Higher production costs could drive U.S. car prices to record highs. But it's not just the U.S. Canada is already shifting away from its economic reliance on the U.S., accelerating trade agreements with the EU, Asia, and Latin America, encouraging Canadian businesses to redirect exports to alternative markets. One undeniable reality: if this trade war continues, it won't just hurt the US and Canada, it could shake the global economy. The big question: is this just the beginning of a full-scale economic recession? US-Canada tensions have reached an all-time high. But is this just the start of a prolonged trade war? The next developments could change everything. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss what happens next.